There's something about the morning silence in places long forgotten by time. The kind of silence that doesn't feel peaceful, but ancient, like the air itself has grown weary of waiting for stories to be told. That's the sort of place we found ourselves in, a crumbling part of the city that no longer belonged on the maps. And there, tucked between weeds and whispering shadows, stood the building. It wasn't supposed to be important. In fact, we almost passed it. Just a gray block of stone and rust, windows like dead eyes, the scent of iron and damp clinging to the walls. No one in the group spoke as we stood before it, each of us feeling something we couldn't quite describe, a sort of heaviness that coiled in the stomach, that made your ears ring ever so slightly, as though the building were humming, waiting. Kaoru was the first to break the silence. This wasn't on the list. Her voice felt too loud. Even though she spoke softly, the sound seemed to bounce unnaturally against the walls around us. Tetsuya just shrugged, but his fingers tightened around the camera strapped to his neck. "Maybe it found us," he muttered, half joking. No one laughed. We stepped inside not because we wanted to, but because we had to. That's how these things work. Some places don't open their doors. They lure you in. The interior was worse than the outside. Layers of mildew painted the walls. Furniture stood frozen mid-collapse. And the ceiling sagged in places where rain had crept in over the decades. But it wasn't decay that made it terrifying. It was the arrangement. Everything was still, too still, like someone had just stepped out of the room minutes ago, but no one had lived here in decades. There was a table with 4 teacups, each filled with stagnant, green-tinged water. A doll lay on the floor, face down, its limbs stiff and pointing in unnatural directions. The air was cold. Not the kind of cold that comes from a draft. The kind of cold that lives in basements of forgotten homes, deep in the foundations where the sun never touches. Akiko walked to the window and brushed aside the curtain. "There's writing on the glass," she said, frowning. We crowded around her. Sure enough, traced into the grime of the window were words, backward, so they could only be read properly from outside. And they said, "Don't wake her." No signature, no explanation. We stood frozen for a few heartbeats too long. Then Tetsuya forced a laugh. Probably a prank, some squatters having fun, but his voice cracked. Kaoru didn't respond. Her hand was on her necklace again, the way it always was when she felt uneasy. Then from upstairs, a thud. Just one, just heavy enough to sound human. We looked at each other, no one wanting to speak, but Akiko was already heading for the staircase, her flashlight beam trembling slightly. "If someone's up there, we should make sure they're all right," she said. Practical, brave, maybe too brave, because bravery sometimes isn't courage. It's the lack of experience with true terror. We followed her. The second floor was worse, colder. The shadows didn't behave naturally. They stretched the wrong way, pooling in corners where the light should have reached. The walls were lined with photographs, black and white, faces that had been scratched out, some with nails, others with something sharper. But the strangest part was that all the bodies in the photos wore the same thing, white ceremonial robes. And in every picture, there was a child standing in the background. Same child, same expressionless face. I couldn't stop looking at that child. Something about the eyes. They weren't eyes that saw, they were eyes that remembered. We reached the end of the hallway. A single door stood there, half open. The sound we'd heard earlier, maybe it came from inside. Kaoru was the one to push it open. It was a bedroom, sparse, just a bed, a dresser, and a small desk covered in yellowing papers. The bed, though, that's what made us freeze. Someone was lying there, a girl. She looked perfect, too perfect. Not breathing, not blinking, just lying there like a porcelain figure dressed in a white kimono. Her hands were folded neatly over her chest, eyes closed, hair combed with such precision it felt unnatural, like someone had spent hours making her look like that. We didn't move. None of us did, because there was something about the air in that room, thick. It felt alive, like it was watching, waiting. Then her eyes opened, slow, smooth, as if she'd never been asleep. They were pale, not white, not gray, something in between, the kind of color that steals all warmth from the room. She didn't blink, just stared. Akiko gasped and stumbled back, knocking over the desk. The papers spilled to the floor. Old notes, some handwritten, some typed. Most were in Japanese, but one stood out. It was newer, the ink fresher. It simply read, "She forgets, but the house remembers." The girl hadn't moved. Tetsuya lifted his camera with shaking hands and snapped a photo. The flash lit up the room for a split second. Then everything changed. The girl's expression flickered. Not changed, flickered, like a glitch. One moment blank, the next rage. Mouth wide open, eyes rolled back. Then blank again. The room groaned, not the floor or the ceiling. The room, as if the very walls had exhaled in disgust. We ran. No one needed to say it. We turned and bolted down the hall, down the stairs, past the teacups and the writing on the window. But something followed. Not footsteps, not sound, just pressure. Like the house was folding in behind us, trying to keep us in. We burst through the front door and collapsed on the ground outside. The sky was darker than it should have been. The street felt different. The building gone, not physically, still there, but gone. Like it had closed its eyes again, pretending to be asleep. No one spoke for a long time. Akiko was shaking. Tetsuya deleted the photo without being asked. Kaoru was muttering something under her breath. A prayer, maybe. I didn't recognize the words. We left that place without looking back. But that night, as we tried to sleep in a cramped hotel room 2 towns over, we all had the same dream. The girl, lying in the bed, eyes open, smiling. Sleep didn't come easy after what we saw. It wasn't the image of the girl that kept flashing through my mind, nor the twisted expression she wore for that split second. It was the feeling, the unbearable weight in that room, the sense that something far older than any of us had looked at us and decided to wait. The kind of thing that doesn't chase but lingers just beyond the veil of understanding, knowing that one day we'd return, and even if we didn't, a part of us had been left behind. That's what true hauntings feel like, not just by spirits, but by memories too heavy to carry. Morning light didn't feel warm when it finally came. It had that sickly yellow tint that doesn't bring hope, just the end of darkness for a few hollow hours. We barely spoke during breakfast. The usual chatter that filled our table, talking about the next location, sharing ghost stories, laughing to ease the tension, it was gone. We sat like strangers, all avoiding eye contact, stirring our food without eating. Akiko looked pale, her eyes sunken, as if she hadn't slept at all. Tetsuya wouldn't touch his coffee, and Kaoru kept rubbing her wrists like she was trying to scrub something off them. The silence became too loud. I broke it, though my voice felt foreign in my own throat. I asked if anyone else had the dream. No one answered immediately, but I saw it in their eyes. That quiet acknowledgement. The same dream, played behind our closed lids, frame by frame. The girl, the same room, the same unblinking stare. She never spoke in the dream, never moved, but her presence pressed into us like a hand to the chest. That smile that didn't belong on a child's face, that frozen room where time bent inward. We didn't know what it meant, but it didn't feel random. It felt like a warning, or worse, an invitation. We decided to leave the town early. None of us could bear to stay another night. The roads out were covered in fog, thick and unnatural, curling like fingers across the pavement. Tetsuya joked that the mist felt like it had teeth, and we all laughed a little. Not because it was funny, but because we needed something to break the dread. But as we drove, something felt wrong. We kept passing the same broken signpost. It was unmistakable. Split at the top, rusted at the base, with a faint smear of graffiti that looked like claw marks. The first time we thought nothing of it. The second time, we got quiet. By the third, Kaoru asked the question out loud. Were we going in circles? Tetsuya showed the GPS. It insisted we were headed south, out of town, but the landmarks told a different story, as if the road itself didn't want us to leave. Akiko finally snapped and told him to pull over. We got out, stretching our legs, trying to calm our nerves, hoping maybe stepping away from the van would break whatever spell was holding us. That's when we saw her again, just down the road, standing still at the edge of the mist. The girl, same white kimono, same black hair, hanging unnaturally straight, as if untouched by the wind. She didn't move, didn't wave, just watched. Tetsuya raised the camera, almost out of instinct, but I grabbed his hand before he could click the shutter. No one needed a repeat of what happened last time. We stared at her, waiting, hearts pounding. Then just like that, the fog swallowed her. 1 second she was there, and the next gone, as if she'd never existed. We got back in the van and kept driving. This time we took every wrong turn we could, anything to break the loop. We drove until the fog thinned and unfamiliar buildings began to appear. The GPS recalibrated, and finally, mercifully, we were free. But the sense of escape didn't bring relief. It brought questions. What had we stepped into? Who was that girl? Why did she appear in our dreams, on the road, in places she had no business being? Was she tied to that building, or had we unleashed something that now followed us? We arrived in the next town by evening, and the shift in atmosphere was jarring. Bright street lights, bustling shops, people laughing over dinner. It felt like another world, one untouched by the weight we carried. For a while, we pretended to be normal again. Ate real food, watched some television, tried to drown out the echo of what we'd seen. But the silence between us never quite lifted. We agreed to take a break from investigations for a few days, maybe clear our heads. But as night fell, so did our illusion of peace. That night, I woke to a sound. Not loud, just persistent. A soft tapping, rhythmic, measured. I sat up, scanning the dark hotel room. My heart quickened as I pinpointed the source, the window. I walked slowly toward it, each step feeling heavier. The curtains were drawn tight, but the tapping continued. When I finally pulled them back, the window was empty. Just the street, quiet and still. But there, on the glass, written in the same backward scrawl as before, were the words, "She remembers now." My breath caught. I stumbled back, heart thundering in my chest. There was no one outside, nothing that could have written that from the inside. I didn't sleep after that. Morning came too slowly. I kept the message hidden, not wanting to burden the others, but I could tell they hadn't slept either. Akiko had dark circles under her eyes, and Tetsuya kept glancing at the corners of the room like he was expecting something to crawl out. Kaoru looked worse, haunted, like something had taken root inside her. I tried to suggest we head home, maybe end the trip early, but they refused. Not with words, but with silence. They knew, just like I did, that this wouldn't stop just because we ran. Something had bound itself to us, and the only way out was through. So we returned to the research, pored over old local legends, dug through libraries, forums, anything that might explain what we'd seen. That's when we found it, a reference to a forgotten ritual, once practiced in a village that had long since disappeared from the records. A rite to bind grief, to lock sorrow into a vessel so it wouldn't consume the living. The vessel was often a child, not an actual child, but a representation, a doll, an effigy, a constructed form meant to carry the weight of the dead. But in some stories, the line blurred. Sometimes the ritual required more. A living offering, a child raised in solitude, taught nothing of the outside world, fed only sorrow until she became the vessel. A living shrine, a curse with a heartbeat. The photographs in that house, the girl in every frame. It wasn't a coincidence. She was the vessel, a container for grief so deep it defied death. And somehow we had disturbed her. Or maybe she wasn't asleep at all, just waiting for someone to look, someone to see her. We realized then that our presence hadn't been accidental. We hadn't found that house. It had found us. Or more accurately, it had chosen us. Why us? Maybe we were sensitive. Maybe we'd stumbled too close to something forgotten. Or maybe deep down, we were already carrying sorrow she could feed on. Because that's what grief does. It finds grief. That night, Kaoru didn't speak. She just sat by the window staring out, lips moving without sound. Tetsuya tried to shake her from it, but she didn't even blink. Akiko started crying, real heavy sobs. She kept repeating a name, Yui. We didn't know who Yui was. She never talked about her past, but something inside her had broken open, and whatever was hiding there had risen to the surface. I felt it too, a weight in my chest I hadn't acknowledged in years. Regrets, losses, the people I'd buried so deep I forgot they were still with me. That's when we understood. She wasn't just haunting us, she was amplifying us, pulling our pain to the surface, feeding on it, growing stronger. The dreams weren't just dreams, they were messages, echoes. And every time we remembered, every time we felt, she fed, we had to end it. We didn't know how yet, but we knew it wouldn't stop on its own. We sat in the dim hotel room as night crept around us like a thick, silent fog. None of us wanted to sleep. No one said it out loud, but we all feared what might greet us once our eyes closed. Sleep had stopped being rest. It had become a doorway, one that opened into places we didn't understand and couldn't escape from. The girl, the vessel, the things she had become. She lived there now, in those dreams. Not like a ghost, fleeting and symbolic, but like a parasite burrowing into our thoughts, threading her way through our guilt, our secrets, our pain. There was no escaping her once your mind became her feeding ground. Tetsuya suggested we try recording ourselves while we slept. Audio, video, everything. He figured maybe we'd catch something, maybe something that could be explained, or at least something to help us understand. It felt like a desperate move, but everything about us was desperate now. So we set up the cameras. Silent watchers perched on tripods at the corners of our rooms, little red lights blinking like tiny tired eyes. And then we waited. We lay in bed, eyes open, hoping sleep would stay away. But it always came. It always came when you least wanted it. That night, my dream began differently. I wasn't in the house. I wasn't even in a room. I was in a field, open, endless, covered in flowers that looked wrong. Not vibrant, but faded. Pale yellows, sickly whites, petals like paper, curling at the edges. Wind swept through them, but the flowers didn't move. Only the grass beneath them shivered. I stood in the center, turning slowly. The horizon curved inward, like the land was folding in on itself. And then I saw her. Not the girl, not at first. I saw a woman, dressed in black, standing with her hands clasped in front of her. Her face was hidden beneath a thick veil, but her presence was sharp, like a razor pressed against the skin of the world. She raised one arm and pointed behind me. I turned and there was the girl, kneeling in the flowers. Her back was to me. Her hair hung over her shoulders like threads of ink, motionless despite the wind. She was humming, a low, mournful tune that seemed to pull the dream tighter around me, like a noose. I tried to step toward her, but my feet wouldn't move. The flowers beneath me held on, wrapped around my ankles, pulling down. I opened my mouth to speak, to scream, anything, but no sound came. Then she turned her head, just slightly, just enough for me to see one eye, wide and unblinking, shining like wet glass in the moonlight. And she smiled. I woke up gasping, drenched in sweat. The room was cold, but my skin burned. I looked around, saw the others still asleep. twitching in their beds, caught in their own private hells. The camera's red light was still blinking, recording, watching. I staggered to the corner and stopped the recording, heart pounding, unsure if I even wanted to see what it had captured. Morning didn't come. It limped in, pale sunlight that did nothing to warm our bones. We watched the footage together. The silence in the room was heavier than anything we'd ever filmed. One by one, we played each recording. Akiko's tape showed her sitting up multiple times through the night, eyes wide, lips moving. No words, just shapes, over and over again, like she was whispering something only she could hear. On Kaoru's tape, something darker played out. She writhed in her sleep, hands clenched into fists, breathing ragged. At one point, she sat straight up and stared into the camera, not like she was awake, but like something else was behind her eyes, watching us. That was when Tetsuya stopped the video. He couldn't watch anymore. No one blamed him. We debated what to do next. Should we go back to that house? Could we? Or was that the trap? Did she want us to return so she could finish what she started? I couldn't shake the feeling that we had left something there. Something important. Not just answers, but a piece of us. Maybe the only way to end this was to retrieve it or destroy it. We didn't know. And honestly, the not knowing was eating us alive. We spent the day trying to trace the origin of that ritual, the binding of grief. We contacted folklore professors, reached out to obscure forums, chased footnotes in articles no one had read in decades. One name kept popping up. Mibu, a word with layered meanings, sickness, imbalance, a spirit that resides in the body without revealing itself. In some texts, it was described as a sleeping curse. In others, a hungry god. A few even hinted that it could be inherited, passed from one generation to the next like a disease of the soul. One tale told of a girl taken from her family at birth, raised in a sealed shrine on the edge of a dying village. She never saw daylight, was never taught to speak. They said she communicated only through dreams, through symbols carved into the wood of her cell. Her name was never spoken, only written. The villagers believed that by pouring their grief into her, they could keep their lands from falling to ruin. But the village disappeared, no one knows how. All that remained was the legend. That night, Kaoru vanished. We searched every inch of the hotel. Her room was untouched, her belongings still packed, phone on the nightstand, bed unmade. No signs of struggle, no messages, nothing. The only thing we found was a single flower on her pillow, one of the sickly white ones from my dream. I broke down, not just from fear, but guilt. We should have seen this coming. We should have protected her. But how do you protect someone from something that doesn't exist in our world the way we understand it? How do you fight an echo that grows louder the more you try to ignore it? We called the police, filed a report, but there was nothing they could do. Kaoru had simply disappeared. No witnesses, no evidence, no leads. And we knew deep down they wouldn't find her. Not in this world, not unless we went back. Tetsuya was the first to say it aloud. We had to return to the house. The idea made my blood run cold, but I agreed. We all did. There was no choice anymore. This thing, this presence, it wasn't done with us. And if we didn't face it, it would keep taking, one by one, until we were nothing but fading memories, whispered warnings passed between frightened children. We packed in silence. No jokes, no banter, just grim focus. As we drove back toward that cursed town, the fog returned, thicker this time, hungrier. It swallowed the light from our headlights, turned every tree into a looming shape, every shadow into something watching. By the time we reached the outskirts, night had fallen. The town looked even more abandoned than before. Doors hung open, signs swung silently in the wind. No animals, no people, just silence. And the house, oh, the house, it looked different too. Like it had grown somehow. Taller, darker. The windows no longer reflected light. They absorbed it, like eyes. We stepped out of the van, and the air hit us like a wall. Thick, heavy. It smelled of dust and decay and something older, something that didn't belong. As we approached the house, the front door creaked open on its own. Not a dramatic swing, just enough, just an invitation. Inside, the temperature dropped immediately. Our breath hung in the air. The hallway was just as we remembered, but the wallpaper had peeled more. The photographs had changed. Some were the same. The girl, the mother, but others, new ones, now showed us, standing in the hallway, sitting in the rooms, sleeping, watching. In one, Kaoru stood beside the girl, both smiling. The same crooked smile. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. The message was clear. She was here, and she was waiting. The stairs groaned beneath our feet like something alive, like the house was exhaling every time we moved. None of us wanted to be the first to reach the second floor, but somehow we moved in sync, drawn not by courage but by something magnetic. The air thickened as we climbed. Each step felt heavier than the last, not just from fear, but as though gravity itself changed with every inch upward. When we reached the landing, we paused. The hallway was longer now, or it seemed longer. Maybe that was the trick. This place distorting itself like a dream you couldn't wake from, stretching moments and spaces until you forgot what was real. There was a door at the end of the hallway that hadn't been there before. It was wooden, dark, and carved with intricate patterns we couldn't decipher. Symbols that pulsed faintly as if reacting to our presence. We approached it slowly. Tetsuya reached out and touched the knob. It turned effortlessly, no resistance, no sound. When the door swung open, we expected another room, maybe a nursery, maybe a shrine like before. But what we saw was a vast open space, a void. It was like the inside of the house had been replaced by something older, something deeper. The walls were no longer wood and plaster, but stone, rough and wet, as though the air itself had memories soaked into it. Candles lined the edges of this room, hundreds of them, each flickering with a flame that didn't dance but stayed unnaturally still, frozen in time. At the center was a chair, not ornate, not threatening, just a plain wooden chair. And sitting in it was Kaoru. She didn't look at us. Her eyes were closed, her face serene. Her hands rested in her lap, and her breathing was slow and even. She looked peaceful, like someone in the middle of a long, silent prayer. We called her name, once, twice. No response. Akiko stepped forward, cautious but desperate. She reached out to touch Kaoru's shoulder, and that's when her eyes snapped open. But it wasn't Kaoru who looked back at us. Her eyes were entirely black, not like the usual possessed trope, the kind of black that made you feel like you were falling into them, endless and cold. Her lips moved, forming words we couldn't understand. The voice that came out wasn't hers. It was layered, like multiple people speaking at once. Male, female, child, ancient. The room pulsed with the sound, and the candles flared as if breathing in sync. And then she smiled. "You returned," the voice said, as they always do. We asked what had happened to her, what this place was, what she was. But the voice didn't answer directly. It spoke in riddles, in fragments, like someone trying to remember a dream from long ago. Pain brought you here. Memory holds you. But only those who surrender can leave. We begged to take Kaoru back. We begged her to come with us. She only laughed, or whatever spoke through her did. "There is no Kaoru," it said. "Not anymore. She made a choice. As you must." Tetsuya stepped forward, his fist clenched, fury in his voice. "You took her. We didn't choose this." And the room shifted. The candles extinguished all at once. The air grew colder, and then the walls began to bleed. Not blood exactly, something darker, slower, thicker. It oozed from the cracks in the stone, sliding down like ink. The floor rippled beneath us like water, and then we heard it, the humming, that same song, the one the girl sang in our dreams. She appeared at the edge of the darkness, not walking, not floating, just there. Her white dress was stained now, her hair matted. She looked directly at me. Her mouth moved with a hum, her head tilting slowly, rhythmically. I couldn't look away. None of us could. My legs trembled, not from fear, but from the overwhelming pressure of her gaze, like she was peeling me open just by looking. And then she spoke, but not with sound. The words were in my mind, threading themselves through my thoughts like roots breaking through stone. I showed you what was lost. You buried it, but it grew, and now it remembers. I understood then. It wasn't just about her. It was about us, the grief we carried, the pain we pretended didn't exist. This place fed on it, shaped itself around it. We hadn't brought the darkness with us. We'd awakened it, given it form. Kaoru wasn't taken. She had been consumed by something that offered her the one thing we all secretly wanted. Release. Akiko dropped to her knees, hands covering her ears. She screamed, not from pain, but from realization. She knows, she sobbed. She knows what I did. She saw it all. The girl moved closer, still not walking, just appearing closer and closer, like a film cutting frames. She stood before Akiko now, and I saw her lips move. But no sound came. Akiko went still. Her eyes rolled back, and then she collapsed. We rushed to her, tried to shake her awake. Her pulse was there, barely, but her eyes didn't move. Her chest rose and fell like someone in a dreamless sleep. Tetsuya screamed at the girl, cursed her, threatened her, begged her. It didn't matter. She wasn't afraid. She wasn't angry. She was waiting. She raised her hand, and the space behind her opened. A door formed from the dark itself, and behind it we saw glimpses, not clear images, just flashes. A mother holding a dead child, a man weeping into a mirror, a girl sitting beside a grave, singing to a decayed photograph. Memories, regrets, lives torn apart and stitched back together in silence. It was a tapestry of sorrow, and it was beautiful in a terrible way. Then she spoke again, this time aloud, her voice the whisper of wind through dead trees. Choose, one stays, the rest forget. We didn't understand, not at first, but then we did. If we wanted to leave, one of us had to stay behind, as a vessel, a witness, an offering, and the others would be free. But forget everything. Forget the truth. Forget Kaoru. Forget her. It was mercy in its own twisted way. Oblivion in exchange for peace. Tetsuya looked at me, then at Akiko, then at the girl. "I'll do it," he said quietly. I shook my head. "Number, we can't. There has to be another way." "There isn't," he said. "She made her rules clear, and someone has to pay." We argued, pleaded, but deep down we knew he was right. Tetsuya had always carried more pain than the rest of us. He lost his brother, blamed himself, never talked about it, but it lived inside him, shaped his every choice. And maybe this was the only way he could make sense of it. By trading his story for silence, he turned to us, smiled. "Remember me happy," he said, "or don't remember me at all. That's okay too." And then he stepped forward. The girl reached for his hand. The door opened wider, and he vanished. Just like that. We woke up in our beds, at home. Not the hotel, not the house. Our homes. As though the whole thing had been a dream. There were no messages, no photos, no videos, no evidence that any of it had happened. Just a lingering ache. Like we'd forgotten something important. something that mattered more than anything. I found myself crying in the shower without knowing why. Akiko called me that night, said she felt like she was missing something, said her dreams were quiet now, empty. None of us remembered Tetsuya, not his face, not his voice, only the shape of the absence he left behind. And somewhere, deep in the woods, in a house that should not exist, a girl in white sings to the memories we tried to bury. Because grief, once awakened, never truly sleeps. The days passed, but something inside us didn't move forward with time. It was like part of our souls had stayed back in that house. Like the clocks in our own lives ticked forward while something inside ticked backward. I'd stare at the sky and feel the pull of that house. Pulling not physically but emotionally, spiritually, like the gravity of something unresolved. I knew I had been somewhere that changed me, but I couldn't remember why. Not clearly, only that sense of loss, a hole in the shape of something I couldn't name. We didn't talk about it. We never made a pact to stay silent. It just happened. Silence grew like moss between us, covering the cracks we didn't want to see. When I bumped into Akiko in the grocery store weeks later, we exchanged smiles and talked about mundane things. How she was trying a new recipe, how work was draining. But when she said goodbye, there was a flicker in her eyes, a tremble in her voice, a shared acknowledgement that there was something just beneath the surface, something we both decided, maybe unconsciously, not to touch. But the dreams came anyway. At first, they were fragmented, a hallway with too many doors, a melody sung in a child's voice, always too far away to follow. The sensation of drowning in shadows that had weight. I'd wake up with my heart pounding, my sheets damp with sweat. And always, I'd find a single drop of water on my bedroom floor. Just one, like a tear that had fallen from nothing, like a reminder. I tried to forget. I told myself I was imagining things. The trauma plays tricks on memory. I buried myself in work, in distractions. But no matter how loud the world got, the silence in my dreams always returned, more vivid each time. And one night, I saw her again, the girl in white, but this time she was older. Her dress had changed, no longer the pure white of innocence, but stained with something like rust or age. Her hair longer, darker, her eyes more human, less void. And she was crying, not screaming, not whispering, just crying. Silent tears that streamed down her face as she looked directly at me. I reached for her, but I couldn't move. My limbs were stone. My voice was gone. And then I heard a whisper, not hers, not mine, but from behind her. He remembers. The next day I got a letter, an actual letter, not an email, not a message, just plain paper in an envelope. No return address. The handwriting was familiar, but I couldn't place it. All it said was, "You left something behind. You know where to find it." I didn't hesitate. I called Akiko. She didn't ask why, she just asked when. We met that night under the old tree near the train tracks, the one we used to gather around during high school summers, talking about dreams and futures we never thought would crack. She brought a flashlight and I brought the letter. When she read it, her hands trembled. She nodded once, almost imperceptibly. "He's still there," she said. She didn't say who. She didn't need to. We took the last train to the edge of town, the one that stopped near the mountains, where the forest swallowed the tracks and the signal died. It was past midnight when we stepped off. No one else disembarked. No one even looked at us, like we were already ghosts. The walk to the house felt different this time. The forest didn't resist us. It welcomed us. The air was warmer. The shadows seemed to part for us, as though the house wanted us to return, as though it had been waiting. But when we reached the clearing, the house wasn't there. Just grass, just trees, nothing but silence. We stood there for a long time, not speaking. Then Akiko knelt down and touched the soil. "He buried it," she whispered. "Whatever it was, right here." And then the ground trembled, just slightly, just once, as if something beneath acknowledged her voice. We spent hours digging, with our hands with sticks, with desperation. The earth was soft, damp, like it wanted to be moved. And after what felt like forever, we found something. It wasn't a body. It wasn't an artifact. It was a mirror, old, cracked, but not shattered. When I lifted it, I didn't see my reflection. I saw us, all four of us. Tetsuya, Kaoru, Akiko, me. We were standing in the house like before, smiling, holding hands. But the image was wrong, too still, like a photograph that had learned how to breathe. Our smiles were wide, too wide, and our eyes, they were empty. The mirror pulsed in my hands like a heartbeat. Akiko recoiled. "It's not a mirror," she said. "It's a window." And suddenly we weren't alone. The forest darkened, the air thickened, and behind us we heard footsteps, slow, crunching leaves with a rhythm that didn't belong to anything living. We turned but saw nothing. The footsteps grew louder, closer, and then a voice. "You opened it again." It wasn't the girl. It wasn't Tetsuya. It was us. Our voices, twisted, echoing back from the trees. "You weren't supposed to come back." I gripped the mirror, felt the glass burn against my palm. It wanted to show us more. It wanted to consume us. But then I remembered something. Tetsuya's last words. "Remember me happy, not broken, not trapped, happy." And I understood. This wasn't a place of punishment. It's only waiting for someone brave or broken enough to dig it back up. When I returned home, nothing had changed. At least, nothing on the outside. The streets still whispered the same wind-blown silence. The lights still flickered with their usual tired rhythm, and the air still smelled faintly of exhaust and damp pavement. But within me, something had shifted. A thread had been pulled loose in the fabric of who I thought I was, and now everything hung unevenly, unraveling slowly but surely. I kept trying to find a pattern in the unraveling, a sense or purpose to the memories that now flooded me at every quiet moment. Tetsuya's face, laughing, weeping, hiding behind those eyes that had learned too young to bear more than they should. Kaoru's energy, so radiant, yet so desperate, always moving like she was outrunning something. Akiko's quiet pain, the way she carried the weight of what we had seen and done like a secret too precious to speak aloud. And me, the observer, the coward, the one who looked away when the mirror showed too much. Days went by, and I stopped sleeping properly. Each night was a strange parade of half-dreams, where I wandered through versions of the house that never ended, doors leading to rooms that folded into themselves like broken origami. And the girl, she was always there now, but she no longer scared me. She watched from corners, from windows, from mirrors, but she never moved toward me. It was as if she was waiting for something I hadn't yet remembered. As if she knew that even with all that had come back to me, the truth still sat buried deeper, beyond the reach of memory and into the domain of the soul. And every time I tried to turn away from her in the dreams, I would wake with that same sensation in my chest, a crushing weight, like I had left someone behind in a fire and walked away without looking back. One evening, I found myself standing at the edge of the lake. I hadn't meant to go there. I didn't even remember leaving my apartment. I was just there. The surface of the water was so still it looked like glass, and for a brief moment, I saw my reflection looking back at me. Not the me I am now, but the boy I used to be. 17, wearing that stupid band shirt I loved, eyes full of hope and dread, and a million questions I never got to ask. And behind him, in the reflection, were the others. Kaoru swinging her arm around my shoulder, laughing. Tetsuya, quiet but content. Akiko, half smiling like she always did when she was afraid someone might see her crying. And the girl far behind them, watching, always watching. I blinked and the lake rippled. The reflection disappeared. I sat by the shore for hours, staring at the water. My phone buzzed endlessly. Akiko, most likely. But I couldn't bring myself to respond. What would I even say? That I was losing time? That I wasn't sure if the memories were real or stitched together by guilt and trauma? That sometimes I woke up with dirt beneath my fingernails and no recollection of where I'd been? There are limits to what even shared experience can bear, and I didn't want to break whatever fragile tether we still had between us. When I finally returned to the apartment, something felt wrong. The air was too still, like the room had held its breath the moment I walked in. I stepped into the hallway and saw that the mirror beside the coat rack was fogged over, not from heat, not from condensation, but from something inside. The glass was clouded like a lung exhaling its last breath, and there, just before it cleared, I saw her again. The girl, closer than before. Her face was clearer now. Not just a specter, a person, a child, no older than 12. And her eyes, God, those eyes, they weren't angry. They were pleading. That night I answered Akiko's call. She didn't ask if I was okay. She just said, "You saw her again, didn't you?" I said yes. There was silence on the other end. Then, "She's starting to remember too." I asked her what she meant. "I don't think it was just us," she whispered. "I think the house remembers." I didn't sleep after that. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, heart racing like it was trying to outrun my thoughts. If the house could remember, what else could it do? What had we left behind that still had power now, after all this time? I started writing things down, every dream, every strange occurrence. The lights that flickered when I passed, the old music box tune that played faintly whenever I stepped into the kitchen, the smell of burning wood that followed me for hours even though no one nearby owned a fireplace. It was as if the house had left a seed inside us, and now it was blooming, cracking our sense of reality open like an egg. One morning, I received another letter. This one was different. It was written in a child's handwriting, crooked, unsure. It said, "Do you remember the promise?" Below it was a small drawing, stick figures, 4 of them, standing around what looked like a tree.